Hello, everybody. Welcome to Gulf Intelligence Daily Energy Markets Podcast. In case you are thinking of adjusting your screen, you are not looking at an older and wiser version of Sean Evers. You are looking at Frank Kane. I'm standing in for Sean today while he's off probably making millions of dollars somewhere. Welcome. Top line headline, Brent is approaching $122. It's the 24th of March, which marks one calendar month from the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And I think it's fair to say that it hasn't gone quite the way that President Putin expected a month ago. I was reading an article earlier this week that said that Ukraine had already done better in fending off murderous aggression than Poland had in 1939, which I guess is heartening to some degree, though given the way things went subsequently there, we maybe shouldn't take too much consolation from that. But I want to start with Ukraine and the global implications and repercussions. Peter McGuire, CEO of XM in Australia. Peter, good evening to you. Is it evening there?
It certainly is, Frank. Good evening or good morning to wherever you are.
Yeah, I'm in Dubai. Let me get a view from the other side of the world, so to speak, from down under. I know Australia has largely mirrored US and UK Western response, the overall general response, hasn't it? Tell me what the current thinking is. How far will Australia go in sanctioning Russia? And in particular, what people there are saying about China. Which way will China fall on this? Will it go wholeheartedly behind Putin? This is your backyard, isn't it?
Yes, I think I'll answer that one first, Frank. The uncertainty leading forward is 26 million people in the country, conscious of where we sit and the ties that we have strategically to China as our largest trading partner. And certainly we don't want to upset them because we're very conscious of what they did over the last couple of years in the sense of, blacklisting some of our commodity exports. There were about 7 or 8 of them. So they took our iron ore, but when it came to wine and it came to certain grains and so on. So I think that we're conscious as far as the relationship between the China and Russia, and one would assume that they will back Mr. Putin, and we aren't here to. Well, we sit on a very much a knife edge. The man and woman on the street are probably mindful of it. The politicians have got a different agenda, and anyone that's got a relationship with China has to be careful of what they say and how they do things. So there's the first line. The second line is the uncertainty from domestically in China. They've got their hands full with the Evergrande situation, and the property market is starting to look very, very shaky. So I think they've got their own internal issues that are going to manifest themselves over the next couple of weeks.
Does that make it less likely that they will be stridently on the side of Russia against the West? Those internal problems, I presume that they won't want to add to those by risking any, Western financial sanctions.
Well, exactly. I think that's right. And yes, they've got their own issues to manage internally. So that could be their, I'm not saying they get out of jail card, but they'll play a very strategic hand as far as Mr. Putin's involvement in Ukraine and how that looks geopolitically. But we all understand, Russia is such a huge exporter as far as gas to Asia. I think it's about 37%, about 47%, I think, or 48% of European gas. So it's a huge elephant in the room, and it's going to be interesting how it all plays out over the next matter of weeks.
The man on the street in Sydney, in Australia generally, what's the sentiment there? Because there must be quite a sizable, I would have thought, both Russian and Ukrainian minority presence there, yeah?
Absolutely, and Chinese, of course. Yeah. So yes, it's we're a very cosmopolitan nation, and there's many different viewpoints. Strong Russian and Russian restaurants, Ukraine. There was certainly a large proportion of our, the Ukrainians are filtered across the nation, but Russia certainly has a large population here, and so do the Chinese. So that's going to be, again, the man and woman on the street where their heart and mind is. It's I think that there's a lot of moving parts that are going to unfold over the next couple of weeks, Frank, that are going to be quite interesting from a geopolitical sense.
Okay. Pete, let's get a trader's view, can we? There was one very interesting item in the News Digest, wasn't there, about the idea of a margin call doom loop for trading outfits. They mentioned Trafigura with relation to this. What's your feeling on that? How serious a threat is that kind of thing?
I think it's got to be fairly serious, Frank. There's no doubting that we saw over the last few years, I can put my mind back to say, the last 15 years, margin requirements being ramped up. Have a look what they did with gold. Just put your mind back over the last couple of weeks, what we experienced with nickel on the LME. So,
sure.
We were looking at 20,000 a metric ton, 30, 40, 50, all of a sudden it's at 100,000. So the price volatility. Yes, I think that this is just a normal course of events. I was listening to Ed Morse in the last 36 hours at an interview on CNBC. Manisha Gupta was asking him some questions, and he was saying he won't be surprised, building on what Carol mentioned, hard to put a price point, 5 to 15% volatility swings per day or a session, and that could be either side. So that just demonstrates what the market is interpreting. We can't put a floor to this. We don't know how high it can go or how low it can go and how quickly it can move. So I think the margin requirements are just naturally an extension of business. That's going to impact from a leverage standpoint how many contracts that you can hold, and they're the cost of doing business. It's a little bit like what we experienced in our business over the last few years. The government globally have changed the footprint as far as leverage for retail traders. And only going back a year ago, we were at 500 to 1. Now it's 20 to 1. Is there
any risk that this becomes a systemic threat? I was reading Javier Blas last week in Bloomberg, talking about the commodity spirals and the possibility that this could become systemic. He even compared it to Lehman Brothers. Do you think that is a threat?
Well, it's a threat if the threat is always, can you meet your margin requirements? And that's the whole nature of the business. If you can't meet your margin requirements, then you can have significant systemic risk. And they're just, you're trading counterparties. That's just the part of doing business. And that's what any exchange needs to minimize, the chance of anyone defaulting. And put your mind back to 1981. I can remember it vividly, the Bunker Hunt brothers and what they did with the silver market. So people have been cornered by aggressively buying futures contracts and other derivatives. So yeah, there's always a chance, Frank, that things can turn sour very, very quickly.
Okay. Can we pull up the question, please? Because this is going to frame what I would like to talk about in the last 10 minutes or so. So 1 month into the invasion, and the question is, with Russia already struggling to meet quotas under OPEC Plus, increasingly excluded from markets, is it time to wrap up the OPEC Plus alliance and allow a free-for-all in global crude? It's a straightforward yes or no. So please give that one a go. And then we will talk now about oil markets and OPEC Plus. I would like to get your views on that, because next week we have the second OPEC Plus meeting of the month of March. I don't think it was planned exactly to come in quite such a critical month that way. It was purely a timing thing with Ramadan coming up in the Middle East. But it is the second crucial meeting, and it comes at a really critical time, doesn't it? The deal is 400,000 plus on the table. Russia can't meet that. Several others can't meet that either. But I'm thinking more in terms of OPEC Plus was a Saudi Russian alliance, and the Saudi side of that equation has almost disappeared, hasn't it, in terms of Russian oil supply to the global market anyway. So I'm wondering what you guys think is the dynamic working behind next week's OPEC Plus meeting. But Peter, let me bring you in here. I'm kind of wondering, what benefits Saudi Arabia and the other OPEC Gulf producers now get from OPEC Plus?
Frank, that's a very deep question. The benefits are strategic. There've been long-term relationships there for decades, and for OPEC Plus, well, the newer members, and it's just that's part of the gang. So I don't see any fracturing. In some ways, I think that the Saudis and the UAE have got very strong strategic ties with Russia. And what I'm expecting to see over the next couple of weeks could be a little bit of a demonstration of that. I don't know how it's going to materialize, but I just feel that there's a lot of, there's a lot of uncertainty regarding not only the war, but more importantly, production, what's happening from a consumption side, and who's going to fill any shortfalls. And I think that the relationships that I've seen it physically, the relationships that the Saudis have with Russia is very, very strong. And I don't see that in any way fracturing in the short term.
Okay. Can we get the question result, please? The answer. Okay. So, well, actually, that's rather a stronger vote for yes than I had anticipated. So that's interesting. But I do fully take the point, Carol, in particular, that the US has a big role to play here now. And I think Biden said yesterday that he expected to see an increase in a big increase in shale production by the end of next year. I would question whether that's too late. And it certainly goes against the kind of sentiment that I heard in Houston at CERAWeek a couple of weeks ago, where most of the shale producers said simply, no, we can't do it, and we're going to carry on, handing out dividends and share buybacks. So I think that is another big issue, and we don't have time for that because we've run out of time, panelists. So that was a really interesting discussion, I thought, and there are so many things going on in the world at large, of course, and in the energy sector in particular. So it's really good to get your expert views on all that. Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you, Osama. Thank you, Peter. Next week, I'm sure you'll have the Grand Master back with you. Sean Evers will be back here, I'm sure. So I will be just joining you as a member of the audience. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure. Bye.